Good afternoon. The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, Aviation Operations, and Safety Subcommittee will come to order. I thank the witnesses for being here today for our hearing on commercial airline safety oversight, and I thank the witnesses for their testimony and my colleagues for attending this hearing. I want to welcome my fellow members of the committee, the witnesses, and the families of the victims of Colgan Air Flight 3407. Your steadfast efforts in the face of tragedy have led to safety improvements that would not have happened otherwise. And thank you for your advocacy on behalf of all the flying public. The Federal Aviation Administration's continued mission is to provide the safest and most efficient airspace system in the world, and by and large, our air transportation does maintain a very high level of safety, day in and day out. The National Safety Transportation Board conducted an examination of U.S. civil aviation accidents involving commercial passenger and cargo carriers from 2000 through 2009, and this study shows that there is a drop in the accident rate when measured by the departures and the numbers of flight hours. That's the good news for the American traveling public. And this is a credit to all the hard work put in by the FAA, airlines, airline manufacturers, and other stakeholders. Nevertheless, we cannot rest. We must maintain constant vigilance and make sure that ongoing system improvements are made, and we need to know all of the potential mishaps that could happen. Take the year 2009. The 5 fatal accidents involving commercial aircraft included 3 non-scheduled international cargo flights and 1 non-scheduled domestic business jet flight and 1 scheduled domestic passenger flight, the Colgan Air crash in Buffalo, New York, in which 50 lives were lost. There has not been a domestic commercial airline crash since. These results are a tribute to incredibly hard work of, as I said, the airline industry and FAA employees focusing on safety. But that doesn't mean that things are working perfectly. We need to continue our efforts. First, we need to understand the root cause of the accident. And getting to the root cause of the Colgan Air crash is just what this committee did over the course of a dozen hearings that this subcommittee had held in the last Congress. And I appreciate the steadfast work of my colleagues, Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, in advocating for the families of the Colgan Air tragedy. Pilot experience and training proved to be a critical issue, and pilot and crew fatigue was of equal concern. We learned about unimaginable long pilot and crew commutes to work, and the co-pilot of the Colgan Air Flight 3407 had a commute of over 2,000 miles from Seattle to Newark. So compensation levels for less experienced pilots and crew is not the only reason for long commutes, but it is far too common a reason. There was also much discussion regarding the consistency of safety practices between regional and large network airlines, and at a fundamental level, the hearing made a question of whether regional carriers were effectively being used in their efforts to make sure that the level of safety was being provided. I find it very difficult to tell if one of the safety level was more important than a policy of making sure that the airline giving the actual name to the regional carrier, whether they were meeting the same standards as the large carrier. Not surprisingly, company culture makes a huge difference in how safety is approached. As with all the industries, there is a range of approaches to safety standards from top-notch to marginally compliant. And we took particular notice of regional carriers because over half of all domestic departures and about 1/4 of all passengers in the U.S. were on these regional carriers. And at this time, many passengers did not know what airline they were flying when they actually booked their ticket. They do now. Given the current financial state of several regional carriers that fly for network airlines, I think that the FAA needs to keep a very close eye to make sure that the safety and commitment remains on par. This committee, working with Senator Schumer and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, led the effort to pass the Airline Safety and Federal Aviation Administration Act of 2010. This legislation made a number of improvements to airline safety and pilot training. Last December, the final rules were issued for flight and duty times for pilots and crew, and proposed rules for pilot certification qualifications. There are several other key rulemakings in various stages that are still making their way through the agency. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine commercial aviation safety since the Colgan Air crash and the progress that has been made by the FAA, the industry collectively, and to hear from the public about these issues. In short, the hearing is to keep American travelers safe and to make sure that we have the best practices in our air transportation system. The committee is very interested in learning the impacts of the 2010 law. And we also want to understand whether the resulting rulemakings were implemented consistently with what Congress intended. Additionally, we'd like to know if there are any issues that remain unaddressed, either in the 2010 law that requires the FAA rules or in recent enactment of the FAA authorization bill. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and I think from the prerogative of the chair here, because we have such a short hearing time before votes, I'm going to just go ahead and forego any opening statements by members and go right to our witnesses. So we'll start with you, Ms. Jillian. Thank you so much for being here. If you could turn on your button and speak right into the microphone, and if you could keep your statements short and provide the full written testimony, we would so appreciate it. Thank you.